Hello, my name is Ailbhe Kenny, and I'm going to be discussing Afro-Irish female experiences of becoming and being a DJ. Three DJs discussed in this presentation are Stephanie, also known as DJ Safari, Kimberly, and Sunita, all in their 20s and all of whom migrated to Ireland at a young age. Sunita, here on the far left, was born in South Africa and left at 8 years of age with their mother and sister to seek asylum in Ireland. They lived in direct provision, which is the accommodation system for asylum seeking, and they left after 2 years, after which time a deportation order was served. Following their mother's departure, the two siblings were adopted by an Irish family. Sunita did her undergraduate degree in music and English in Cork, and is 29 years of age. Here in the middle is Kimberly. Kimberly is on the left, and she's part of the duo, The Doll and the Rose. She's also part of a DJ collective called the Ubuntu DJs. She's 20 years of age and moved to Ireland from South Africa with her family when she was 10. Kimberly studied in Galway and has remained living in the city ever since. Stephanie on the far right moved to Cork from Nigeria with her family when she was 5 years of age. She studied criminal justice as an undergraduate and is currently pursuing a master's in interactive media. She gigs under the name DJ Safari and is 22 years of age. And here's just a sample of DJ Safari's work, which will also help get us into the headspace of DJ musical worlds.
DJ Safari exclusive.
Yeah. Walk up in the thing, I be on my game. If it's competition, I put them to shame. Different kind of chick, we are not the same. I raised all these babies, call me Captain Jackson. Please don't steal my style, I might cuss you out. What you doing now?
In this presentation, I seek to provide some insights into these women's learning journeys. Their journeys of becoming DJs from fieldwork gathered at in-person and virtual gigs, individual interviews, informal conversations, online information gathering, as well as media broadcasts. As female DJs who are part of Ireland's Black and Irish communities, these women are politically, socially and culturally define norms and expectations through their musical practices. How they project, negotiate and fashion their identities within the field is of particular interest, while also of course paying attention to the multiple ways these same identities are also dictated, stereotyped and or silenced. While their individual experiences are contextually and culturally specific, I hope that by amplifying their experiences that it will open up a space to understand and learn from these underrepresented women in DJ musical worlds. Musical identities are always in flux and are negotiated within the contexts of musical experience. This idea becomes even more pronounced in the field of music and migration, where the scholarship now views musical identity as no longer bound to ethnic or national backgrounds. For the DJs here, it's important to recognize their agency in this process. Music then is put forward as a means of negotiating and experiencing oneself as an agent. Within DJing, it's tempting to view these practices as some kind of solitary enterprise, but this isn't actually the case. The three DJs presented here have a wide array of networks, contemporaries, and mentors, with all three of them part of organized DJ collectives. In fact, in the scholarship, it's been found a rise in the all-female DJ collectives, and that such a gender-specific approach circumvents the informal male networks that females typically have limited access to. Katz explains, while these networks are not necessarily discriminatory, they tend to perpetuate the underrepresentation of women who might not feel comfortable spending time alone with groups of male DJs in the bedrooms and basements where they usually gather. DJing then is well recognized as a gendered field of practice. The underrepresentation of women is largely associated with the gender politics of technology. But even when technical skills are acquired, female DJs suffer from low expectations and increased judgment due to gendered perceptions and assumptions about proficiency. For example, O'Sullivan has found amongst DJs in Dublin that their male peers did not take them seriously. They felt under constant scrutiny. Their genuine interest in music was constantly under question. Gender issues associated with DJing also go beyond technology. Judith Butler's theory of performativity, I think, is a very useful lens to apply to the 3 DJ trajectories, particularly in examining their lived and embodied multiple identities that they bring to their musical practices. Taking a Butlerian view, the body is produced through discourse, and thus reality is constructed discursively and performed, not just through language, body norms, and physical acts, but also contingent on power relations, historical events, and environments. As such, one is made and remade through repetition. And the repetition of these discourses often support or uphold existing power structures. Directly related to this discussion then is the Black migrant female body, which represents multiple performativities. In order to perform, however, one must be rendered recognizable. Butler is keen to remind us that such recognition functions as a site of power. Taking on the views of Butler then, in order to be a DJ, the women in this discussion need to be recognized as such. Who holds this power of recognition, and how such recognition is accessed and acquired throughout the women's learning journeys is of particular interest to this examination. While the DJs attribute much of their exposure to music as young children to their mothers, both Stephanie and Sunita claim more specific influences on their DJ musical practices with their father figures. For Sunita, her stepfather in Ireland did some spinning, but she more so attributed his influence to exposing her to the scene. She relates, I came to collecting vinyl and having an interest in vinyl through the safety of my dad, being a person that was doing that already and giving me a certain portion of it. The fact that I had a collection of vinyl showed maybe a lot with my dude friends. They were probably surprised, certainly surprised by the variety. And there was this element of, oh, cool girl, I know your dad does stuff like this. Those things frame my interests and my abilities in the context of a man kind of safe guiding that experience in a way. Sunita here recognizes the kudos of having a foothold in a DJ musical world, particularly amongst her dude friends. This has significant resonance with Butler's view of recognition acting as a site of power. For both Stephanie and Sunita, paternal gatekeepers granted access and recognition to a world that might have been difficult for them to enter or thrive in otherwise. While the DJs all participated in music making and music listening throughout their adolescence, it was not until their early adulthood that they actually began to learn their DJ craft. Sunita is the only DJ who formally studied music to degree level. She recalls, there was a period there where I was really getting into Afrobeat because I just didn't know much about it. And my sister was like, dude, are you ignorant? You have a music degree. And I was like, I don't know if that's what a music degree is for. On the one hand, as this quote highlights, Sunita's music degree did not formally involve any DJ training per se. Yet, Sunita was quick to acknowledge the wide music friendship circles and networks that she acquired during her degree, and she claims that that aided her route to gaining DJ gigs in Cork and beyond. She also talks about the formal educative influence that the music degree had on her DJ practice more generally. Stephanie and Kimberly, on the other hand, had solely informal and non-formal learning experiences. Peer-to-peer influences here were all important for them. Kimberly shares, it was very accidental. We would hang out with one of the guys who had decks, and I remember they would always play and I felt left out. After a while I was, could you guys teach me? And they did, and I picked it up pretty quickly. Stephanie relied on YouTube videos in the main to begin with, and in a similar vein to Kimberly and Sunita, soon reached out to male friends and networks to aid not only their learning development, but also access to playing gigs. Repeatedly then, all three women interviewed relied on male peers, overwhelmingly from African diaspora networks. They did this to access both learning and performing opportunities throughout their early years of DJing. This gendered gatekeeping is also borne out in previous studies of female DJs. Sunita was acutely aware of how exoticized she was growing up in a small town in the southwest of Ireland due to her skin color. I'm just going to play a short clip now. This is a documentary she was part of called This Land, and it's just a short snippet of Sunita discussing this.
That as an interest.
We moved to like Castlemaine village on the side of a mountain in like 2003 or something, and genuinely people might not have seen that many foreign people walking on a mountain, like off the bus going home. In any case, never to mind like an African family. There's a shared camaraderie about certain experiences relating to like colonialism or whatever else and stuff. So maybe there's a kind of a natural curiosity as to like, oh, you know, where does your family hail from, and la 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 la. And then in the wider context of racial things, it kind of gets like hard to decipher where the intent in that is from. But for me, like for the most part, people were just super curious. They were just like, geez, you know, the faces are changing in Castlemaine now. And I'm like, yeah.
Interestingly, Samantha Mumba, who's a Black Irish artist, was at the peak of her career when Sunita was a young teenager. Sunita's memories and connections to this are really interesting. She says, I remember lying to my friends in secondary school. I was like, yeah, Samantha Mumba is my cousin. Everything was believable because I was new and I was novel. I was obsessed with her because it's that thing, it's representation. There's Black people here that are not me. That was a big deal. As I found from previous studies of children living with indirect provision, Sunita is racially identifying with music artists here. As well as this, Sunita is afforded a chance to capitalize on her otherness through the representation of a Black female pop artist in Ireland, or as she says herself, at a local level. Forming and negotiating a musical identity often is associated with in-group and out-group status. Gaining a sense of belonging then within such a group or a community of musical practice acts as a signal of identity, as well as a means of defining other musical identities or lack thereof. As the three DJs developed their craft, membership of DJ collectives became an important part of their journeys and musical identities. Two of the DJs in the study were members of one such all-female collective, Girl Code. As well as accessing mentoring support, they also relied on this collective to access gigs in the capital city, stating it would be very difficult for them to enter the scene in Dublin otherwise. At a more local level, Kimberly speaks fondly of her membership with the Galway Ubuntu collective. This is a collective of 6 DJs, of which 2 are female. They're also friends who live and hang out together. Akin to Stephanie's learning from male DJs referenced earlier, Kimberly attributes all of her DJ upskilling to the male members of this group. She claims, most of the things I've learned is from them. It's one of those things where if I had DJed by myself, I don't know if people would have had the same reception of me as they do when I'm with the lads. Oh, she DJs with the lads. She's one of them. Once again, in this quotation, we see not just learning processes being accessed through male peers, but also the power of recognition. It's held by them and others, and how reliant on this association this female DJ is. Kimberly goes on to give further insight in this regard. She speaks of how she and the other female DJ in the collective are both perceived and treated by management at venues in comparison to the male members. She says, I find that compared to the lads, say the management, they wouldn't remember our names. They wouldn't take us seriously. They just think we're there for decoration. Stephanie mentioned at interview not being paid by some venues because of her gender, because they think they can get away with it, she says. All three of the DJs reported the reception of surprise from those who attend their gigs. These are some of the comments that they get from the audiences that they play to. I didn't expect you to be good at all. I thought I'd never see someone do what you do that has a vagina. Oh, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect you to actually play that kind of music. They find there are low expectations placed on them when they take to the decks, but through their playing that they challenge these stereotypes. The DJs then repeatedly have to assert themselves in a space that is openly skeptical and at times hostile due to their gender. Their migrant status only serves to exasperate these issues, with Kimberly sharing, when people see me, they kind of assume I'm going to play Afro House because the assumption is when they see that, when they see a Black Irish DJ. Some concluding thoughts. Keevan and Meinhof note, by following the life stories and career trajectories of migrant musicians as individuals, we are able to move away from discourses that essentialize ethnicity. Instead, we're able to trace the experiences of migrants as individuals who are not solely identified in terms of their ethnic or national affiliations, real or supposed. This presentation hopes to expand the often limited portrayals of underrepresented women's DJ experiences within the field. In doing so, it highlights DJ practices as one area where racial identity intersects with the multiple realities of music, migration, and gender. Through an examination of becoming and being a DJ for the three women discussed, it's clear that representation alone cannot confront the wider social and cultural biases at play. For instance, there was an overwhelming reliance on male figures in their DJ lives, whether that was parental or peer support to gain access to the scene, whether it was to learn skills or gain recognition amongst venue management and audiences. This presented distinct challenges to the DJ's learning journeys, their access to performance opportunities, the inclusion in networks, recognition, and even at times payment for work done. Musical identity is mediated through negotiations within what Finnegan would describe as musical worlds. That includes numerous stakeholders, networks, and influences. The three DJs involved in this study were all very open about the need to be part of collectives, both formal and informal, as well as communities, in order to DJ beyond the bedroom. Their lived and embodied experiences highlight how such support is crucial to defy the norms and expectations that are placed on them as Black female DJs. Thus, both diasporic networks as well as DJ collectives emerged as crucial for informing their DJ identities, but equally recognizing this aspect of their professional musicianship. Being a part of formal collectives was also shown to aid a moving away from male-only gatekeepers, though to a small degree. As Butler reminds us, if we are not recognizable, if there are no norms of recognition by which we are recognizable, then it is not possible to persist in one's own being, and we are not possible beings. We have been foreclosed from possibility. In considering the inclusion of more women, and specifically more migrant women, in this very gendered field of DJ practice, one must consider how to open up to increased possibility that Butler speaks of. And here are just some references. You can always email me about those too. Thank you for listening.